Welcome to this session. While Sarah's playing Tetris on her computer and doing all kinds of interesting things, this is the session on two organizations that you really ought to know about. The first group does international conferences and reach outs and so forth. And I've had the privilege of participating in them. And they have an absolutely awful acronym, so I don't feel so bad when I look at mine. But at any rate, Sarah is here to talk to us in picture, and Mark is on a phone talking through speakerphone to her. So I'm going to turn the program over to them, and we can go a few minutes late, and Sam in the next session will go a few minutes late. So there you go.
Okay. Sounds great. Well, thank you, Brian. It's nice to see you again. As Brian said, I'm Sarah Quebec Fuentes, and on speaker, I have Mark Bloom with me, and we are the co-executive directors of the International Consortium for Research in Science and Mathematics Education. And for short, we say ICRSME. So it would always be easier to say ICRSME, but sometimes we say it and people don't know what we're talking about, and then we have to say the whole thing. So it's not, as Brian was saying, not the best acronym. Now I'm not being able to forward. Okay, so we're gonna just share a little bit about ICRSME. And then we're going to talk about a little bit of some grounding ideas about one of our current foci. Hey, Mark. I'm hanging up. And that is, how do we build and establish genuine international collaborations? And then we're going to talk about ways in which you could engage with ICRSME. So ICRSME was founded in the 80s, starting with the work of Dr. Art White from The Ohio State University, and he was doing a lot of international work, and that originally developed into the first consortium that ICRSME held in Trinidad and Tobago in 1986. And then since then, there's been, and I'll show you in a moment, there's been 15 international consortiums. And as you see pictured there, those were organized by Dr. Art White, as you see on the right, and Dr. Donna Berlin on the left. And then 3 years ago, at our last consortium in Costa Rica, where Brian was, they turned over the leadership of ICRSME to me and Mark. So the mission of ICRSME is the advancement of science and mathematics education in participating countries. And this mission is based on the premise that all people can benefit from the knowledge and experiences of their local, national, and international colleagues. So just to give you a sense, since 1986, over the last 30 or so years, these are the different places. Primarily the conferences, the consultations are held in Latin America, Central South America, or the Caribbean. And then you can see in 2021, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we went virtual.
Only took 6 minutes to say COVID. There it is.
Yeah. So aligning with ICRSME, the mission of ICRSME, we have these 5 goals. The first one is about designing and conducting research related to mathematics, learning and teaching. The second is developing academic exchange programs. The third is forging connections between local, state, and national educational associations across the countries. The fourth ties into the first goal as well, but this is going to really tie into what we're talking about further. It's establishing these research projects and agendas, really meeting points of need in particular locations. And then lastly, promoting collaboration. And that's going to be our focus today. We're really delving into how do we build collaborations. So again, how are we working towards these goals? So we're using the construct of communities of practice by Wenger et al. To form the foundation of how we think about collaboration. And so collaboration has a domain of knowledge, or communities of practice have these three components: a domain of knowledge, defining a set of issues, a community of people who care about that domain, and then a shared practice. So if we look at ICRSME as an example, we are a community of people who care deeply about the learning and teaching of mathematics and science. And what we're working towards now and really critically thinking about is how do we develop this shared practice? So some work that I did about collaboration with a mathematician colleague, Dr. Lauren Spice, in that work, we found that there were really two critical premises that need to be established in these collaborations for them to be genuine, for them to be effective. And one is a shared goal. And we talk about this idea of a shared goal beyond a given goal. So right now, if you think where we live with ICRSME, our goal is about the teaching and learning of mathematics and science education. That's incredibly broad. So when we come into a collaboration, we actually need to identify a shared goal that's more focused. And that goal is tying into that second bullet, co-constructed with the participants. The other piece, this co-construction of knowledge, is we really want the knowledge development to be bidirectional and not unidirectional. And so it's really critical that we're coming to this from a stance that we are going to be learning with people, right? And then there's 4 contributing factors that we also want to consider. The first is conflict. And a lot of times we come at conflict and we have this negative perspective of conflict, but the way that we look at conflict is that it's a process and it's a learning process. And to be able to navigate that conflict, we need to establish norms of communication. We need to establish trust. And then we also need to have an element of reflection. And the way that we think about reflection is in a couple ways. One is that it can be really informal reflection, and there also should be some purposeful reflection built in to the collaboration. And then the other piece is that we're reflecting on a couple of things. We're reflecting on our progress towards our shared goal, like how are we moving towards achieving that shared goal, or what are we learning towards moving towards that shared goal. The other piece is to also look at the collaboration itself. How are we doing? Like with all of these characteristics, are we collaborating effectively? And we'll get into some other questions we consider as well. Now, for international collaboration, all of that holds true, but there's also some additional challenges that we need to consider. So there's logistical challenges like time differences or different academic calendars. And Atway and Cantel also look at international collaboration from the perspective of social justice. And actually talk about 5 signs of social injustice that you want to be cautious about. So there's exploitation. So we need to think about whose knowledge is being privileged, whose research methods are being privileged. Marginalization could happen from the perspective of language, like what is the language, the language that's being used to communicate. And then marginalization can also come from economic stance as well. So for example, if I'm in a country in Central America, in a university there, it might be very difficult for me to travel to an international conference in Europe or Asia because of finances. And that can lead to powerlessness and this feeling of not being part of this community. There's also cultural imperialism. And this ties into what I talked about before with thinking about this, if we have this unidirectional way that knowledge is being expressed, and if we're taking ideas from one situation and assuming that it's going to work in another context. And then if we combine that cultural imperialism with funding opportunities, then Atway and Keitel talk about that as symbolic violence. So with that background, and through the literature, we formed these working and guiding questions that we want to think about as we interrogate our work as an international organization. And we want to think about is who is included in this international collaboration? How are the various members included in those activities? Are the decisions being made in a fair and just way? Are the means to work together effectively and with equal rights collaboratively considered? So that kind of is overarching of everything that we're talking about with these questions. Who benefits from the collaboration? Whose views are expressed in the products of the international collaboration? And then whose knowledge is being represented in the international collaboration. So that's a little bit of background about where we are and how we're thinking about our mission and how we want to move forward. Mark, are you there?
I'm still here. My bandwidth is kind of bad, so I turned my camera off. So I don't know if it'd be distracting for me to jump in, or whether you want to jump in, or we both go together.
Go ahead. You can do it, and I'll jump in if you need me.
So this little QR code, I hope it still works. It worked the other day. This is a way that you can just become a friend of ICRSME. It's an informal kind of group, but so we don't have it too terribly fancy. But if you would like to become a friend of ICRSME, what it would do is get your name into our email list, basically. And we'll see in the upcoming slides here what that will kind of put you on the hook for. And it's not intrusive. We try to keep our emails to a limited amount. So I don't know if that link's going to show up several times, I think, throughout the remaining slides. So if you didn't catch it now, it'll be there later. And we have our contact information as well at the end, because we do want to get more people pulled into this group. It's a relatively small organization, but we are trying to grow the younger members and really make it be an organization that is sort of an on-ramp to pull science and mathematics educators into academia so that they can really become a part. So it fosters that growth. One thing that will get you, if you do become a friend of ICRSME, is you could get a quarterly newsletter. And we chose this one because there's Brian Winkle right there. And this is he contributed to one of our newsletters. We've just started that this year. And so we share information there. We share opportunities for professional development. We can share kudos and congratulations on published books and different achievements like tenure, because we're really trying to foster that community of engagement. And this is an international thing. The QR code here is a link tree that will take you to a lot of different aspects of what ICRSME has to offer, including the newsletter and other opportunities, which you'll see in the upcoming slides. Sarah, you can jump in, or Janice.
Yeah, I just saw people holding up their phones for the QR code, so I was just
okay.
We'll give them a chance. All right.
So 2021 was supposed to be the first international consultation that Sarah and I managed to pull off for ICRSME, but of course the pandemic happened, and we were actually scouting out locations and finding venues and all the different opportunities that people could engage in Panama right when the first case of COVID hit in Panama. And we barely got out before they shut down the airports. And so rather than calling into the consultation, we decided to make it a virtual conference, which many people did. And what we realized is that actually was a serendipity. We realized that because ICRSME is a biennial consultation in these different countries, there's a lot of time that can happen between the two consultations. And we thought really having a virtual conference in the middle is a good idea to kind of maintain the connections and maintain the interactions between the participants. And so the first virtual conference was in 2021. That went exceptionally well. Our next virtual conference is happening next month, March 12th. The other great thing you can see in this image is that when you have a virtual conference, it costs $30 to attend and to interact with peers, as opposed to flying to Panama or Belize or Costa Rica and paying for hotels and paying for everything else. We've managed to get some great plenary speakers both last year and this year. And so we think it's going to be an exciting event. We've got, I don't, what the last count, we had what, 90 or 100 people that were going to be
About
attending?
100, I think. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So it's still small. So it's not like AERA where there's 10 hotels and 5,000 people. So it's really a nice intimate kind of group where we can share ideas. And so we invite you to join. If you could use that registration link right there and come. You can invite your students, only $15 if they would like to participate. And we'll see later at that link tree, we're actually looking at increasing sort of a infrastructure of the group and pull people into different levels of leadership with the organization and take on roles like being reviewers for the journal, which we'll see in a minute. Well, let's just move forward. We'll see that.
Okay. And the one thing I would just add on is that, as you can see here, the theme of building off of sort of our focus right now, the theme is international collaboration in science and math education. And the two plenary speakers are, aligned with that theme.
So this kind of happened. Help me with the dates if I need it, Sarah, but shortly after Art and Donna passed the gavel to us to take on the leadership of ICRSME, the editors of the Electronic Journal of Science Education, which is the first electronic journal for science research that has been around for over 25 years, the editors of that journal came to me and Sarah and said, would you like to become editors of the Electronic Journal of Science Education? And we said, after some deliberation, we said yes, if we can make it the electronic journal for research in science and mathematics education and partner it with ICRSME. And so now the electronic journal has become ICRSME, which is the flagship journal of ICRSME. It's a peer-reviewed journal that it's been a true labor of love. It's been a lot more work than we expected it to be, but it's an open access journal. It's published quarterly, and we typically have 5 or 6 articles in each manuscript. It includes research articles or theory practitioner pieces. We include those as well. And it's following in the line of one of the missions of ICRSME, which is to be that supportive on-ramp to bring people into the world of academia. So if you want to flesh that out a little bit, Sarah, you probably got the numbers in your head a little bit more. We have a rigorous acceptance rate, but we're supportive and helpful of new researchers, helping them get into the published world. Sarah, do you want to add to that?
No, I think I think it serves both purposes, like obviously early career people, as well as, I think, like you said, we do a lot of articles that are published are research articles, but we do have the opportunity for theoretical or practitioner pieces. So there is that flexibility in the type of article that's submitted.
And the other really nice thing with it being open access, it's free for anyone who wants to get it. You publish in here, you can save the link to your article, add it to your signature on your email, share it with your colleagues. Anyone can get it for absolutely free. So it's a way to get your research out to an audience that's really going to be able to read it. So opportunities with the journal is we covet people who are willing to read pre-published manuscripts and offer their professional opinion on them. So that first QR code there is an invitation to become a reviewer for the journal. We have extensive materials that we've developed that kind of guides newer people in how to conduct quality reviews and that we can share with them. The bottom one is the link to submit a manuscript yourself in either science or mathematics education. What else should we share there, Sarah?
I think that's good. Like as Mark said, we we are continually thinking about ways to expand people's opportunities to be involved with ICRSME beyond just attending the conferences and the consultations, and being involved with the journal is one of those ways.
So this slide is announcing our 2023 with fingers crossed. You can't see my camera, but fingers are crossed that in 2023 we'll be able to conduct an in-person consultation in Panama. The location that we scouted out is the Ciudad del Saber, which is a former U.S. military base that has now been repurposed, and it's become a city unto itself with schools and churches and bowling alleys and restaurants and everything you can imagine that a city needs. But it also houses many NGOs and organizations that are involved in sustainability efforts throughout the country, and education, and all of many things that are aligned with the values of ICRSME. It's a really fantastic location, located right on the Panama Canal at the Isthmus of Panama. And it's 10 minutes away from tropical rainforest and 10 minutes away from the uptown modern area of Panama City, and 5 or 10 minutes away from Old Town, Casco Viejo. So it's a really great location. Really hoping we'll be able to pull it off. A colleague of mine in science education just hosted a group of undergraduate students to the Ciudad del Saber and was able to pull it off successfully. So I think as long as we go in knowing the proper Panamanian protocols for COVID protection, we'll be able to pull this one off, and it's going to be an exciting event. So that QR code will take you to the about that. That's a link tree that would have that information as well.
When is the date?
We don't have a date yet.
Okay.
But,
what time of year?
Typically March. So it would be March of 23.
Which is nice because it's before the rainy season hits in this region of the country. Yeah. And the flights are not too terribly expensive at that point. And it's not hurricane season yet. And so it kind of aligns with that international area.
And then
so there are many different ways to communicate with us. You want to take it, Sarah?
Sure. So a lot of those QR codes will bring you to the link tree and will get you in communication with us in a lot of different ways. But we also have our website at www.icrsme.com. And then we also have several emails, just the general ICRSME email, which is the first one. The newsletter email, if you're interested in submitting something to the newsletter, you can reach out to that email, and then also the journal email if you have questions or inquiries about possible submissions. And that's all we have, right? Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure there's some interest I'm hoping there's some interest in this. Are there any questions about the richness of what the plans are? They have a journal, they have meetings, they have online events, they have hopefully a real event. And I've been to that place in Panama. So it's a wonderful time of year to go there. Any questions?
Did you have a question, Sam?
Yeah. Thank you. First, congratulations, Sarah and Mark. That's great organization to take over. I'm not very familiar with it, but I'm going to follow up a little bit. Can you just say a little bit about your use of the term consultation for the meetings? Maybe I missed it when you introduced that term, how you use it.
It's a really good question. I don't know, Mark. I think the way that it originated, and Mark, please add in, is that in the 80s, Dr. Art White was doing a lot of international work. And so the consultation was a place for all the people all the people who were engaging in this international research to come together and share what they were doing. So it, and do you want to add on to that, Mark?
Well, I would say it's some of the history of the organization that Sarah and I have been reflecting on deeply since we took on the leadership. is that we want to ensure that it truly is authentic collaboration between countries that we're learning with and from the partner countries that we go to. And that very word is one thing that will come up. One of the initiatives that we have started now is an ad hoc committee to really dig into our core values and missions and make sure that there isn't the idea of we show up in Caribbean countries and Latin American countries and tell them how they should teach science and mathematics, which the word consultation almost kind of leans in that direction. We don't want that to happen. So I'm sure that's one of the things we will be discussing is, do we need to reconsider the name of what that event would be?
Yeah, I really hope that you get to have an in-country conference. I didn't travel overseas until I was late 60s. And I went to Canada, but that's like north of the United States. And since then, I went to a conference in Costa Rica, independent of this. And then I went to that conference, and then I was invited to give 2 weeks worth of seminar in Panama, and then a virtual thing in Panama. And I think it's really rich to exchange with colleagues across cultural barriers like that. It's much nicer to be there with them. And as a typical patronizing gringo American, you get the feeling that you have all the answers and you're going down there to just help these poor people. The answer is no, no, no. You're going there to learn from these people because they have incredible ideas, incredible energy. And they speak 2 languages, and I only speak 1. And so I have every admiration for your efforts and the reach outs and what we can learn from them and what we can bring there. And since I've retired, when I go to these conferences, I go to Costa Rica for a week, and then my wife and I take 3 weeks and just tool around the country. So think about this for those of you with a little more gray hair than normal. As you retire, these are good conferences to go to for keeping in touch, for sharing your wisdom, and for seeing a different part of the world that you might not otherwise go to. You're certainly not on a tourist journey. You're there to do good things. So I commend you. Any other questions, comments? You've given us more than enough to think about, and enough QR codes for a lifetime.
Yes.
And I want to thank you very much, and we'll take like a 3-minute break and get Sam on next. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian, and everyone else. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank
Okay.
you for the opportunity.